Random House Audible presents The Best Business Stories of the Year, 2002 edition. Edited by Andrew Leckey and Ken Auletta. A job is not just a job, and money isn't everything. The terrorist attacks of September 11th, 2001 made us step back and look at everyone and everything around us differently. This essay by Businessweek editorial page editor Bruce Nussbaum recognizes the brave new stars of our American drama and helps us focus on the nation's true values. Bruce Nussbaum, Real Masters of the Universe.
A subtle shift in the American zeitgeist took place on September 11th. It's hard to define, and it may not last, but on the day of the World Trade Center cataclysm, the country changed. Big, beefy working-class guys became heroes once again, replacing the telegenic financial analysts and techno-billionaires who once had held the nation in thrall. Uniforms and public service became in. Real sacrifice and real courage were on graphic display. Maybe it was the class reversals that were so revealing. Men and women making $40,000 a year working for the city, risking their own lives to save investment bankers and traders making 10 times that amount, and dying by the hundreds for the effort. The image of self-sacrifice by civil servants in uniform was simply breathtaking. For Americans conditioned in the 90s to think of themselves first, to be rich above all else, to accumulate all the good material things, to take safety and security for granted, this was a new reality. So was the contrast of genuine bravery to the faux values of reality TV shows such as Survivor. Sea of Flags. Noteworthy, too, was America's quick return to family, community, church, and patriotism in the aftermath of the tragedy. People became polite and generous to one another without prodding. On that day and the days that followed, they told their wives and husbands and children and parents and significant others they loved them. And the flags, the sea of flags that appeared out of nowhere and spread everywhere, worn by business-suited managers and eyebrow-pierced tattooed teenagers. As if by magic, city taxicabs, building canopies, and nearly every truck in sight were flying flags. The offerings of food, money, and blood were overwhelming. The generosity was unsurpassed in our memories. But the manner in which perfect strangers went out of their way to help one another in all kinds of situations was most amazing. To the surprise of its residents, New York became a small-town community. The day-to-day antagonisms among the citizenry melted away. The rush to church, synagogue, and, yes, mosque was equally unusual. People returned to their religious ceremonies and congregations in huge numbers for support and guidance. The overflow at the doors demonstrated that many who had not visited in years showed up to participate in the familiar and comforting liturgies of their childhoods. They joined with their neighbors in mourning. Lessons taught. It was, for a moment, an old America peeking out from behind the new Me Now America. We saw a glimpse of a country with shared values, not competing interest groups, of common cause, not hateful opposition. There were a few exceptions. Jerry Falwell declaring we brought the death and destruction down on ourselves because of homosexuality, abortion, and the American Civil Liberties Union. A silly, stupid comment to be dismissed in light of the comedy of the day, but an extremist remark nonetheless made in the name of God. How sad. Tragedy has the power to transform us, but rarely is the transformation permanent. People and societies revert back to the norm. But what is the norm for America? Where are this nation's true values? Have we stripped too much away in recent years in order to make us lean and mean for the race to riches? It is hard to look at the images of the World Trade Center rescue again and again. At least once, however, we should look at what the rescuers are teaching us about what matters and who.
Devastation, anger, and fear were immediate results of the World Trade Center disaster. That tragedy could also have a more long-term psychological impact on a national economy that was already in a precarious condition. Paul Krugman's carefully researched cautionary story in the New York Times Magazine urges that the United States avoid the mistakes of history. Prosperity is at risk. Paul Krugman, The Fear Economy.
The American economy is usually quick to shrug off the effects of disaster. When Hurricane Andrew swept through South Florida in 1992, and again when the Northridge earthquake struck Southern California in 1994, the property damage was immense, and the lives of millions of people were disrupted for months thereafter. Yet, few economists thought of either event as a threat to national prosperity, and if you look at a chart showing the growth of gross domestic product, it's quite hard to see any effects. Will it be different this time? Although September 11th was a human tragedy on a scale far greater than any of America's recent natural disasters, in monetary terms, the immediate loss wasn't much more than one might have expected from a severe hurricane or earthquake. Yet many people fear that the terror attack, unlike a hurricane or an earthquake, will have dire consequences for the economy. Indeed, that it may even tip the world into recession. And though they're probably wrong, they could be right. The reason they might be right has little to do with the nature of the calamity. It's true that there's something especially horrific about a disaster that was an act of man rather than an act of God. And the after effects were unsettling. Airlines losing hundreds of millions of dollars a day, empty airports, hotels, and theaters, conventions canceled, Wall Street spiraling downward. It's also true that the story isn't over, that unknown perils, another attack, a full-scale war in Central Asia, lie ahead. And of course, the terrorists struck right at the nerve center of global capitalism. But the economic repercussions from the World Trade Center disaster, unnerving as they are, would soon fade out if the economy had been strong to begin with. The main reason to worry about the economic fallout from the attack is not the attack itself, but the timing. Suppose the terrorists had struck 5 years ago, while the economy was in the midst of a healthy, investment-led expansion, and before the rise and fall of the stock market. Would we have been as worried as we are? I doubt it. The point is that even before the attack, our economic condition was looking unusually precarious. We weren't in a severe recession. Technically, we may not have been in a recession at all. But there was an alarming sense that things were out of control, that our economy's ailments weren't responding to the usual medicine. In another time, we might mourn the dead and move on, but this economy was already fragile. To understand the economic risks we may now be facing, in other words, we need to understand why we were in trouble even before terror struck. It's a story that takes us far afield in time and space, to the Great Depression of the 1930s and to the difficulties of modern Japan. These stories of other times and places give ample reason to be concerned, for they remind us that even highly advanced economies like our own have sometimes stumbled badly. But the stories also give us reason to be optimistic, even if things go badly over the next few months. The terrorists may have taken us into uncharted territory in many ways, but the economic landscape is fairly familiar, and we have some pretty good ideas about how to deal with the risks ahead. But first things first. Although the atrocity was an immense human tragedy, it was limited to a small part of one city. How could destroying a few buildings, however large, ever possibly threaten an economy as huge as ours? The psychological impact. A disaster can hurt the economy in one of two ways. It can reduce supply, that is, it can interfere with the economy's ability to produce. Or it can reduce demand, that is, it can make people unwilling to buy the economy's products. What are we worried about right now? The answer is that for all the damage in Lower Manhattan, the terrorist attack's impact on the supply will be minor, compared with the awesome scale of the United States economy. Perhaps 15 million square feet of office space were lost. While that may sound like a lot, it's less than half of 1% of the office space in the nation. The cost of clearing the rubble and rebuilding will run into the tens of billions of dollars. Less than 0.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?